A massive Bitcoin turnaround is happening, and there are only a few hours left until the next Bitcoin Valhalla boom could hit. According to Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump is very likely to announce today that the tariffs between the US, Mexico, and Canada will be changed. So basically, we're looking at a new deal here. And we've seen that this deal has led to a massive sell-off of Bitcoin. If there's a positive turn here, it could mean a big jump up for Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be, and it's not 100% guaranteed that the announcement will come. But we look at the interview with Howard Lutnick, in which he says quite clearly that tomorrow Donald Trump could announce here that the tariffs will come to a new agreement. And that probably means in your time, around noon, 1 p.m. I'm not sure, maybe later, or even in the evening, we can expect a potential impact. And we need to take a close look at what's behind that. We also see Nayib Bukele, who has been heavily criticized by the International Monetary Fund. But he's now giving them the finger and clearly saying, no, we're going to keep buying Bitcoin. Let's take a look at what that's all about. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary in the US, says he wants to lower interest rates even further, which will also bring more liquidity into the market. So we have some super exciting topics that we need to check out. But the most relevant thing is actually right here. The story with Donald Trump, Howard Lutnick, and the tariffs. And as mentioned, we've seen it time and time again now. Donald Trump makes an announcement. We have tariffs, the Bitcoin price goes down. Then Donald Trump says a day or two later, oh sorry bro, we messed up. We've found an agreement again. And then the Bitcoin price shoots back up massively. And that could happen now too. So we now have Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada and also on Mexico. And Howard Lutnick also talked about it in an interview where he addressed the whole fentanyl story. That people are dying here and at the borders and at the borders. That just doesn't add up. There are some shady and questionable things going on, and the US can't accept that. And accordingly, Donald Trump has imposed tariffs on Mexico and on Canada. And now take a look at what Howard Lutnick is saying live about the current situation. And there could be a massive turn here. And I don't want to say, put all your money on the line that the Valhalla candle is coming now, but there's definitely potential. It doesn't have to shoot up ultra high right now. But it could definitely be that it goes up a few percentage points when Donald Trump announces that. And on top of that, we also have a situation in Ukraine that we'll take a look at shortly, which could lead to some relief and maybe even a positive Bitcoin move tomorrow. But first, let's see what Howard Lutnick has to say and why this is so relevant.
But the fentanyl deaths are just not declining in the way we expected. So what do you think the president's going to do? He's going to come out today angry that Americans are still being killed. Now, both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because, you know, he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow. So somewhere in the middle will likely be the outcome. The president moving with the Canadians and Mexicans, but not all the way.
So you heard it straight from Howard Lutnick, who first says that he doesn't think the current situation is so great. Donald Trump isn't too happy with how things are going right now in Canada and Mexico. But Donald Trump would be a very fair player here. And if they notice that things are improving here, that something is changing in Canada, that something is changing in Mexico, and that they really want to improve the situation, then Donald Trump is definitely ready to make some cuts here. And then Howard Lutnick says, we will probably announce it tomorrow. Tomorrow means that's today for you, at some point during the day. So you can actually expect it to be around noon or later in your time zone, probably between noon and 5 p.m., sometime around then, or maybe even in the evening. And it also says here that the tariffs are not going to be completely lifted. That's also an important factor. That means the tariffs will remain in place, but they'll probably come to some sort of middle ground. That means, for example, instead of 25% tariffs or 20% tariffs, they might settle somewhere around 5% or 10% tariffs or something like that. That they just find a middle ground. And that would be a very, very good sign for the entire financial markets, because tariffs are always very, very problematic. Tariffs are inflationary. Troughs are always a shock for the financial market, which we have seen again. And this could definitely lead to some relief here. And that could then lead to a pump upwards again. How high the pump will be, I have no idea. Whether it's going to be a few $1,000s or if it ends up being a nothing burger, who knows? But there is definitely a possibility that we could see a pump upwards. So feel free to drop a comment below and let me know if you think the pump is coming. Like I said, I don't want to say anything right now. This is the absolute prediction that the pump has to happen tomorrow. There's a probability. That's given, maybe 50, 60, 70% or something like that. Feel free to share your thoughts. And Howard Lutnick also mentioned that maybe the announcement could come from other sources as well. He said probably tomorrow. But probably tomorrow could also mean that it might come the day after tomorrow or something like that, depending on how they come to an agreement here and so on. And then we had a very, very strong statement from the Bitcoin president here in El Salvador, Nayib Bukele. I made a video yesterday saying that the International Monetary Fund has now banned El Salvador from buying Bitcoin. That was an absolute shocker. A lot of people were absolutely shocked here. But now some really, really important details have come out. First, it turns out that the reason why El Salvador probably went along with this because their debt ratios are really, really bad. Another article came out on Bitcoin News. So I was personally shocked. I didn't think the debt levels here in El Salvador were that bad. But that makes sense, of course, when you're in a tight spot like that. And you have to imagine El Salvador. I mean, it was the most criminal country in the world. They had a murder rate here that was just insane. I don't know how many people died each day, but it was basically a huge battlefield here. And of course, the economy and the whole system were really brought down because they not only had gang wars, but before that, they had 20 to 30 years of either civil war or gang wars, all sorts of stuff, and the whole country was more or less in debt and ashes. And they already had IMF loans from earlier times, and now they were just here, more or less in a tight spot. So they really don't have a choice but to go along with the IMF, from what I understand, because a lot of people said, okay, really messed up, and so on. I might have thought that at first too, but when I saw the debt situation, it really hit me that things look really, really bad here. So it might even make sense to accept the IMF loan if otherwise, let's just say they go bankrupt. And I don't know what the consequences would be if they basically couldn't pay back the debts anymore, or something like that. For sure, that was the first thing. The second thing that's happening now is, and this is even crazier, and you really have to say, hey, thumbs up to Bukele. So it was pretty clear from the documents that El Salvador needs to stop buying Bitcoin. Then it came out from many sources that they are actually allowed to keep the 6,000 Bitcoin they currently have. And then there were a lot of sources that even said they had to sell off the Bitcoin they currently have. So sell the 6,000 Bitcoin. So as it stands right now, they are allowed to keep the 6,000 Bitcoin. And now something really, really, really crazy has happened. Bukele bought another Bitcoin here. That still means that the IMF is saying, hey, you can't buy any Bitcoin. And yet a Bitcoin was bought here. And Bukele is basically giving them the finger. And he even made a tweet about it. And he says here, so it used to be said that all of this would end in April. Then it was said that all of this would end in June. Then it was said that all of this would end in December. So this is the tweet from Bukele. And then he says here, no, it won't stop. When it didn't stop when the world ostracized us and most Bitcoin left us hanging, it won't stop now. And it won't stop in the future either. And then he adds, proof of work is better than proof of whining. So, proof of work is better than just whining around here. And just like a whole lot of other people. So, you can't stop Bitcoin adoption. A whole lot of people have also said, hey, this is awesome that this is happening now with the International Monetary Fund in the comments on the video yesterday. Because people are just realizing, hey, Bitcoin is unstoppable. And those are the signs that we're winning here. There's no better sign than when the International Monetary Fund is going hard against Bitcoin. That shows we're winning. And then others joined in too. Stephanie Namus also said, hey guys, it's awesome that Bukele is still staking and all that. And you shouldn't let yourself be discouraged now. I mean, on the other hand, it's pretty clear. There are also voices saying, hey, it has to be stopped at some point. And then there were a few people saying, it's been a month, in 2 months, and so on. But that's been said so many times already. In June, it's going to be stopped. In December and October, just like Bukele made clear. So far, it still hasn't been stopped. And Bukele has now made it very clear with his statement, no, it won't be stopped. And you just have to keep an eye on how this all turns out. It could also be that Bukele is playing with fire. I hope it doesn't burn out. So, I hope for the best for the country. I hope the best for Bukele. I'm actually in El Salvador myself. I love it here in El Salvador. I'm on my way to the beach right now. I say, I'm staying at the beach a bit longer, but it's really, really exciting to see. And then we have another story happening here. Scott Bessent clearly stated in an interview that he wants to lower interest rates in the U.S. And that's a positive sign for Bitcoin and for the financial markets in general. We also know from Donald Trump that he's a big fan of low interest rate policies, that he wants to bring down interest rates. And that's also what could finally make Bitcoin explode. What can make the financial markets explode? That strengthens the stock price. And we also know that Donald Trump probably places a lot of value on it, on the stock price, but also on the Bitcoin price. He's talked about the Bitcoin price several times because he sees it simply as a measure of success for his policy. But let's take a look at what Scott Bessent has to say about the current interest rate situation here in the U.S. and why all of this is also bullish for Bitcoin. And I think it's important to mention Scott Bessent is the Secretary of the Treasury in the U.S. I think it's important to mention that.
On the economy so far, what do you want the president to include in his speech from your department?
Well, Brian, President previewed his speech with some of the cabinet members yesterday, and he's got so many accomplishments. You know, on the economic side, I think thus far one of the biggest wins for the American people is since Election Day and since inauguration, mortgage rates have come down dramatically. Both the level of the 10-year bond and the spread between the 10-year and mortgage rates, which I think is an effect of the bank deregulation we're going to do. So that, I anticipate.
Does that affect credit cards too?
Well, the interest rates will affect credit cards. It'll affect auto loans. And the bottom 50% of Americans over the past 2 years have gotten crushed by these high interest rates. So we're set on bringing interest rates down. And I think that's one of the great accomplishments so far.
So we're looking to reduce interest rates. I think that's a great experience so far. An inverted yield curve where the 10-year bonds are below the 3-month Treasury bonds. That has always been a recession indicator. And look, now I've arrived here at the beach. Very, very high water today. Let's see if I can get in there later. Definitely, yeah. We now have the inverted yield curve. And that's potentially a good sign, as God willing, they say. Because when interest rates go down, then mortgages will go down. Then people buy houses. Then more people can afford credit card debt. So people can live even more on credit. Then even more people can get auto loans or whatever. That's good for the economy. But whether it's good for individuals personally, I have no idea, because then people are also more in debt again. But in any case, debt becomes easier, and accordingly, the economy gets a boost. Because that's just how a fiat money system works. We have a debt-based money system, and economies benefit from that, especially from cheap money and low interest rates. That stimulates my economy. When they offer cheap interest rates and cheap money, everything just goes up. In normal cases, risky assets benefit from that, like Bitcoin and everything else. And if you're halfway into Bitcoin now, I'll put a link down below for you, 21 Bitcoin. You can just simply buy Bitcoin. With the Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Now I'm going to show you my slice of political wandering here in El Salvador to the Boca and the volcano crater. So we hiked up the volcano and then walked down the trails. There were a few cool hiking trails. Let me give you a little insight here.
Well, but if they hadn't built the setup. It's tough here, but look how crazy this nature climbing route is.
That's even harder, yeah?
Yo, watch it.
Yeah, just hooked it and against the wall in here.
And there's also the rope. Hypothetical. Volcano hike. Now we're going here.
And the Omega candle here.
Let's see how we get up here.
If the Bitcoin price would just rise like that, yeah.
So let's climb up here. It's easy. You just have to know how. If you have always been climbing and know how to do it, then it's easy. Okay, you're going. That feels harder. I had that feeling. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good man. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Heartfelt. Thank you.